Welcome back to another episode of SEEK Bytes, the podcast for engineers by engineers. On this episode, we have a special guest, Thet Ko, our senior staff engineer from the AI Platform Services team, talking about our AI gateway, how to centralize all your AI calls, what problems they solve, and some of the extra benefits that happen to bring along the way. Stay tuned and enjoy the show. Welcome back to another episode of SEEK Bytes, the podcast for engineers by engineers. Today I'm joined with Will. Hello. Arnav.
Hello.
And Thought.
Thet. Hello.
Thet. We'll keep that in. That'll be funny. Thet from our AI Platform Services platform team. Nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Maybe we start off just by getting you to speak a little bit about your role at SEEK, maybe your background, how you got into engineering, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Right now, I'm a senior staff engineer at the AIPS division. This was a recent shift. I used to be an engineering manager.
I did hear about that. I was very surprised. I don't think it's very usual for someone to shift from EM to senior staff, right?
Potentially not. But I think a big part of that is also a learning journey for myself. Also, what am I good at? What do I enjoy more? At the same time, as a manager, one does not want to let the team down as well, right? Because if the heart is really on the solution, then it's really finding a better solution for the team.
Yeah, cool.
Well.
So you found yourself like gravitating towards trying to solve the solutions rather than trying to solve the team problems?
Yeah, exactly right.
Team dynamics? Yeah,
exactly
nice,
right.
cool.
I think that's a nice way to put it. That's really where my passion lies, and part of the journey was to figure that out for myself as well.
Cool, nice. What's some of the things that you've built in AI platforms, or like what pulled you away from being an EM to doing senior staff?
I think it's really, again, it's where I gravitate towards. I work with a lot of the engineering leaders or head of engineering, the engineering directors, and where I really excel in is trying to understand where is this business context and what is driving these initiatives and what can engineering do to help bridge that gap. And that's where I spend a lot of my time, my thoughts, my effort in. And really, it's translating that into how can we deliver that as engineers and then moving that dial forward. So,
yeah, cool. I'm really interested to know, I have some idea about some of the services, like why your team exists in the first place, right? Like what services does the team own? But I'm curious to hear from you. What's kind of the landscape, what's the software garden look like for your team?
The software garden as in what software we're running right now?
Like what? Not necessarily the technologies.
He's not a gardener. He's a software engineer.
Funnily enough, it's a term that I heard the EM from AI platforms use, and it's the first time I've heard that, and now it's stuck in my head, and I use it all the time, maybe incorrectly. I guess sort of less about like the technology like Redis and stuff, but more about like what's the products that your team owns that you serve to the rest of SEEK to make our lives easier?
Yeah, right. If we start off with the holistic approach is we see this huge shift, not just in SEEK, but across the whole world where generative AI seems to be replacing a lot of traditional MLOps or ML model use cases.
You mean like using like off-the-shelf LLMs instead of building your own models?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So even when building their own models, with the traditional ML, it wasn't necessarily transformer-based models. It could have been tree-based models, or the XGBoost, or a lot of those other stuff. And the shift between which is happening now is moving to prompt engineering as opposed to the former, which was around hyperparameter tuning, all these different models, trying to find the models with the least loss, F1 scores or whatnot. So that shift has been happening for 2-3 years now. And the way I look at it from the platform side of things is we know that organizations are shifting more to agentic use cases. We know that the world is shifting towards lower cognitive load for users. So products that are being built is how can we reduce the complexity for the users. So given that scenario, we look at what can we do in the platform team that enables the domain teams to focus on the use case without having to worry about the foundations, because the foundations are common across all these different use cases. So the ideal scenario we want is for the domain teams to think about how do we build this agent? What should this agent solve? And what is the experience that the users that interact with the agent go through? What we want to solve is how do we provide the agent with brains? So there's the LLM, that's AI gateway. How do we provide them with the tooling or the capabilities that they can do something? So that's through the MCP gateway, MCPs, APIs. And then all the way through to how can we share memory across all of these different agents, because we want a very similar experience, right? If you deal with one agent to another agent, we want that similar experience. So how do we get that fundamental memory or the data layer across the organization as well? So those are the concerns from the platform team. It's really how can we enable teams to just think about the use case more so than anything else.
Yeah, interesting. So I guess there was a bit of a paradigm shift from the bespoke model approach where you kind of had to understand what it is that it needed to do its job and kind of simplified the interface, which is where you're talking about prompt engineering, right? So we're spending less time thinking about what the model needs from a data perspective, like what we need to feed in for it to do its job, and it's more about like asking it to interpret our needs. So it's interesting. I hadn't thought about that before because I haven't really worked with any AI models, I mean, since uni, which were very simple heuristic things. I wouldn't even call them an AI model. So I wanted to, what was it you said a second ago? The data layer. I'm very curious. Maybe you tell us if it's maybe too quick to dive into that point now, but I am really curious to know what exactly that means in terms of the infrastructure. What are we doing to provide a memory layer? Because memory seems to be a hot topic right now, especially with OpenClaw and stuff like that and Cursor and whatnot. People are starting to build their own kind of memory layer, which when I say that, I'm talking about like, who am I? What do I want? How do I want this model to respond to me? That's a different kind of memory, I imagine, than what you're talking about. Or is that very similar?
The scope of it is fairly large. So on the most simplistic scope is you've gone to an agent, you've had previous interactions, and you want your agent to remember your previous interactions so that it can continue where it left off, your preferences and whatnot.
Okay, so we are on a similar wavelength.
Correct.
Yeah, cool.
And then you get to the more complex scenario, which is the organization has many agents. Is there value in your interaction with agent A that can then be used for agent B? And if there is value, how does then one share the context across all these different agents?
Yeah, when you say memory, is that similar to the context of typically what it's called, or is that different?
That's exactly it.
It is, okay.
Because at the end of the day, with LLM, it's all the context that you provided. And context can be gathered from concept like RAG, which is get it from a vector store, some documents, or it could be just your previous interactions with a particular agent.
Yeah, at the end of the day, context is everything the current chat or the current like interaction is aware of. Memory is like persisting between chats. So you could tell your agent, hey, remember who I am? And it might store that as like a .md file. There's many different ways to solve that problem. But memory is essentially context that persists across chat windows. So if you start a totally fresh context, memory is part of what the harness is injecting in so that it knows who you are and how you like it to operate. It's just one of the many things like skills, rules, memory. It's all just like pre-injected context so that every new chat has an awareness of how you like it to operate. So I'm guessing that's kind of what are we starting to look into this, or do we already have this at SEEK?
I think that's what we're starting to look into it, because the complexity is not the technology. The data layer is been solved many different times. There's many different type of storage, vector databases, just relational databases, just so many different options, right? The complexity is vocabulary and terminology. How do the different teams align on understanding, on vocabulary? So at the end of the day, it's taking real world scenarios and putting terminology in the software layer to represent what is actually happening. So I think that is the challenge, and that requires many teams to align.
Okay. Yeah. So it sounds like it's less of a technology problem and more of like a business context problem. It's like, what's the best way for us to use memory? What problems does it solve for us? Like we have a lot of different AI tools. Maybe memory isn't the most valuable thing for these things to have for every single scenario. So is that right? It sounds like more of a business context problem?
It is. It's a usage problem. So if I extrapolate this to what we have around data platform right now at SEEK, there's so many different tables representing very similar data. if we wanted more consistency, then teams would need to agree. But that is a very challenging aspect because teams always have nuances in how they use data. And I would not be surprised if that scenario was reflected in the memory or shared context layer in the agents as well.
Yeah, right. Like there are many forms of job data, many forms of candidate data, profile data. For us to get the most value out of memory or the most value out of these models, having some consistency of data. I never thought about that now, and it's going to make me question every time we create a new table in data platform or something like that. I'm going to be like, does an existing table, is there a table that exists already? Or maybe that's a question for you. What could teams do to sort of promote a more consistent data architecture to help with this problem?
Yeah, I think it's, in my view, it's always an incremental process. It was very difficult for a particular team to go, this is the vocabulary that we all need to align on. It's very much like an RFC, right? These are all the aspects and you cannot deter away from it. One is because it's very difficult to anticipate what exactly all these behaviors, all these terminologies we want to encapsulate. I think the iterative process is once a team starts to use a certain set or, for example, they're trying to store a memory of an interaction. So if I interact with you, Seamus, and go, hey, Seamus had a bad experience, for example, right? Should the next agent know about it? And if they do know about it, what vocabulary should they know to say that, hey, we need to interact with Seamus a bit differently because he had a bad experience and he may be a hirer that's about to leave.
Interesting.
Yeah. How much is that I always think of like personal data and stuff like that sometimes when this comes up. I'm talking about persisting some of these things across models. Is that something that's thought about in some of these, in like memory and AI, and like if someone's talking to an AI in a certain way or giving it data within a chat and that then is persisted later, is some of that PII? Is that some of that, I don't know, is that something you can kind of filter and stuff? Or I'm not too sure.
It's a very good question. And that's one of the drivers behind, we're going to do 360 because we talked about AI Gateway, MCP Gateway in the beginning. One of the drivers is the governance side of it. We all know that with each team and how SEEK operates AWS, everybody gets their own account. It was very difficult to control those scenarios around PII, data leakage, where it's getting persisted and whatnot. So having something like AI Gateway where for the input request that comes in, we can have a global guardrail that masks PII data, know what's being sent, and also do guardrails against prompt injection as well. That does mean we solve the problem once on a global scale as opposed to each team having to solve that.
Now's a good time to talk a little bit more about what problems the AI Gateway solves. I think we very briefly mentioned the existence of an AI Gateway. Maybe you could talk a little bit about like what is the AI Gateway, what problems does it solve, and then we can talk a little bit about the technologies that we chose to.
It started about, I guess, a year before, and this was in anticipation of the growing usage of LLMs across SEEK. One limiting factor in AWS, especially when you're using Bedrock, is there was no cost allocation. You were not able to determine the project A cost. How much of this whole budget in my AWS Bedrock usage was project A, B, or C, or D? We just couldn't do it. And that was the fundamental driver around we need to do something about it. So bringing the AI Gateway across was really how can we get governance, how can we get oversight on expenditure? And we're not there yet, but one of the ambitions is also how can we allocate to different projects and potentially on charge to different teams and their budgeting and whatnot, right?
That was going to be my next question is like, are you currently wearing all the budget?
We are wearing all the budget, yeah.
All right, cool.
But we have the visibility.
Got it.
Yeah, exactly right. We've got the visibility, but we don't have any on-charging mechanism right now, right? That's then progressed onto governance. Then how can we ensure safety for all LLM usage across the organization, right? And this is where we are right now, or even last quarter, reviewing a few different guardrail vendors. So we've been reviewing Encrypt AI, Dynamo AI, some of the Google offerings, some of the AWS offerings as well. So this is in line with going, we want to protect all LLM usage across the organization, which are the best vendors or solutions or options that we have available to be able to achieve that.
And are these just like packages that you install on your server that kind of act like a wrapper that filter data coming in and out? Is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
Yeah, well, these are external vendors. It's just like an LLM call, but we make a guardrail call. And they, depending on what they use, they also use LLMs behind the scene, right? So Encrypt AI, you can create your own custom policies. You push it through their service, and they can come back. We've got violations A, B, C, D. It didn't meet these SEEK guardrails or guidelines, and those are where we can block or stop it.
Interesting. My next thought, I mean, I want to try not to go too far down on one topic, so we can stick on understanding all the problems we're solving and the technology for the AI gateway. But it makes me wonder if we're sending the request to an LLM or something that might be an LLM service as a guardrail to tell us what to protect against, why is that safer than sending it into Bedrock? Is it because the response, we're worried about the responses coming back?
There are some limitations on Bedrock guardrails, if that's what you're asking specifically. So Bedrock guardrails have a few cases where you can go, hey, protect against bad words or mask out PII or do contextual filtering for hallucinations or whatnot. But it doesn't have that natural language where you can go, if it meets these criteria, then it is deemed not acceptable. So with some of the more advanced guardrails, it's very much like LLM where you can prompt it to tell it what is acceptable and what's not acceptable, and then it can then respond back.
Right, okay. So I know, because Will mentioned PII and we kind of started talking about this from there, so my brain was stuck on that concept, but I kind of picked up on what you're saying there. It might be, we don't want it to talk about our competitors because that wouldn't be good for our business. We don't want it to use, we don't want it to swear, that kind of stuff. So it's not just about PII, which is where I was thinking, like, how is this any safer, but more about making sure that the structure of the responses suits our business and our customers' needs.
Correct.
Yeah, cool.
And,
Nice.
and you can even go one level further where some of these vendors allow you to fine-tune their models specifically for your use case as well.
But that, I understand that like the AI gateway is supposed to like just abstract away all of the complexities for like other teams other than AIPS, and like for other teams it's just about making a call with like a prompt and then getting a response back based on whatever the requirements are. But then with the fine-tuning aspect of things, how would that work? You like mentioned we do have like data persisted across other models as well, like for other use cases. Does that sort of trickle into the fine-tuning aspect of things? Like as a layman, you would think, oh, it's just a prompt going in and then you get a response and then you just roll with it. But then there's like a lot of other things that go on with it, right? You want to make sure that the responses that you're getting back meet your standard, and then you also want to like make sure that like the quality is up to the mark as well. So how does that fine-tuning aspect work into the thing?
Sure. So in terms of quality, that falls more towards the evaluation side of things, right? So before any project goes into production, the team would understand the use case. They most likely have a golden data set. A golden data set is based on these inputs. This is the expected output that we have. And through the evaluation process, they will do prompt engineering, which is this is the prompt, give this input, test it, and just last quarter we released LangFuse. So that was the solution to help teams evaluate different models, evaluate different prompts, and find the most performant model for the outcome or the desire that they want. In terms of fine-tuning, that is the next level. So with evaluations, it's obviously evaluating against some of the models that are already available. With fine-tuning, it's going, hey, we believe that we can use a smaller model, which is cheaper to run faster, lower latency. And we believe that if we give this model our data and the outcomes or the labels that we want to produce, that we will be able to achieve improved efficiencies and optimizations. Right? So that is something that I think a lot of teams are thinking about. We haven't got to that stage yet. And they're thinking about that because as you start to scale LLM usage, you'll soon reach this point where the amount of volume that you're pushing through it no longer becomes as economical, and then you have to start optimizing, and that's potentially the catalyst for the fine-tuning aspect.
This is kind of like the AI bubble thing. It's like, sure, there's lots of ways we can use this thing, but does it economically justify how much we're using it?
Yeah.
And if you can't make that equation make sense, then you have to start reducing costs, basically, right?
Correct. Well, yeah. So if we were to look at the maturity phase, it's first you have to generate value, right? You can't invest in all of these different ideas and technologies until you get value. So I think that's where we are. Once you get the value, then it's going, how do we then reduce the cost to maintain the same value?
Is this more for like for our customers, or is this internally for like devs and stuff using the AI, that it's kind of going through these AI gateway? I suppose I don't know too much about where the AI gateway fits within.
Yeah, right. Like, is the AI gateway being used with our cursor tooling, or is
That's
it
what I
just
mean,
used to
yeah.
serve our external customer-facing
Yes,
stuff?
yeah.
Yeah. I think there is ambition for it to serve all, if not majority, of the LLM traffic across SEEK. But there's always case-by-case scenarios. If we had an enterprise agreement with, let's say, Claude or whatnot or Cursor for internal tooling, maybe it's not practical to use it. And under those scenarios, it probably wouldn't be.
Yeah, because we have a contract that protects us from certain, like, we expect the quality of the product to be at a certain level. We expect the cost to be at a certain level. So, like, the cost management is solved by the contract that we have. The quality is not as relevant because it's internal. It's not customer-facing. So quality, it doesn't really matter what the AI is responding to me as an engineer because it's not leaving, it's not putting things into the code, or hopefully not putting things into the code that's going to get out to customers, right? Yeah, that makes sense to me that we probably wouldn't do it that way. All right, cool. So we talked a little bit about like cost management, quality management. What other problems did the AI gateway solve?
Yeah, a big one that we're looking at now is resilience. So resilience is, if you are an engineer working directly with Bedrock, depending on which model, you'll find that it is unstable. It is not very resilient at all. So a good scenario I'll give you is DeepSeek. So Bedrock has an offering to serve DeepSeek, I think in Sydney, in the US West, or is that Ohio or Oregon? I can't remember for the life of me. But in the Sydney region, we had an experience where it was down for 1.5 days. Never have I seen this across any of the AWS services before. And this, I would like to say, but it's not true, it is a very common scenario where models are down for anywhere from 30 minutes to a few hours.
Within an entire region, right?
Within
Or
an
just
entire region.
Not necessarily globally, but just within.
Within.
Which doesn't really matter if it's globally or not, because you're not usually hooked up to every region. So if it goes down in your region, it doesn't matter if it's down globally or not. It's down for you, and that's all that really matters.
Correct. And that is one thing that the AI gateway tries to solve, is the fallback mechanism. Is if it's down in one region, without you having to know or care, it will reroute you to a different region.
And that's, I believe we can talk about the technologies that we use. That's a light LLM, right?
That is
It's got
correct.
the fallback configuration and stuff
Exactly
like that.
right. Yep.
Yeah, okay, cool. Nice. So yeah, cost, quality, resilience, that makes sense to me. Is there any other big...
Sorry, why are models down for so long sometimes?
Yeah,
like that?
Yep. Let's talk about that.
I'm not sure how much of this knowledge people know, but I'm pretty sure you would. If you read in the news or whatnot, there is a silicon GPU shortage across the world. So if you are a hyperscaler and you have a limited budget for models, and if you look at AWS or GCP, they are hosting how many serverless models? 20, 30, 40? I can't even keep count. Within a limited set of resources, as a client or a user starts to increase the volume, then you'll start to get that natural degradation. And it's not easy to scale these ones at all as well, because they have, again, limited resources.
True, yeah. I mean, I hadn't thought about that, but it makes perfect sense. We have this problem that exists globally with chip shortage. Why would AWS be free of that or immune to that problem? So essentially, they've got a fixed amount of compute, and then as people are making requests of LLMs, as they try to allocate a model to some of those chips, to some of those blades, those servers or whatever, They don't exist.
Yeah, and I think experiences will also change between if you're using a very common model like the Anthropic ones, you'll experience less of it because they probably have a bigger buffer. They also have a bigger user base, right? If you have a bigger user base, then they can start to spread the load a bit easier than if you have a less common model like DeepSeek, where they go, okay, we're going to allocate this much because our volume looks like this, and then just one or two different accounts just spam it, then it becomes very difficult to manage.
Yeah, right. I guess it's just like trying to spike your Dynamo traffic.
Exactly
Like,
right,
if it's
yeah.
not scaled to handle the traffic, you're not going to get the response. I guess the shocking thing is that it took a day and a half for it to come back again.
100%.
Yeah.
But again, that's an outlier. That duration's an outlier. Usually it's a few hours.
That's how long it took for Amazon to deliver more chips. That's why.
Yeah, that's how long it took the drivers to get there and actually put the chips into the server.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, cool. All right. Yeah, that's not something that I thought about, but that makes a lot of sense. I mean, knowing how like LLM has the configuration for fallback, I always thought about it as just being blips. I guess I would be very shocked to see something go down for I think we'd all be shocked to see any service go down for a day and a half, right? That'd be very abnormal.
Can these chips and stuff, can they just fail over? Like, is it kind of like a battery? The more you use it, the worse it gets, or anything like that? Or are they, I don't know. Or is it just like there's just too much data for them to handle?
Like not lack of availability, but quality degradation.
Yeah, is that a thing?
Do we see the models degrade? Like, do we see using the same model, the quality of responses degrade over time?
I don't think so, because it's all just mathematical and probability behind the scenes, right? It's it takes these words, it puts it into a numeric format, and then just puts it through.
Yeah, I think the reason that I ask that is because I see a lot of Reddit posts about people saying, I'm using Opus 4.6 and it's gotten worse. And I think what people need to understand is that the model doesn't change. If you're using Opus 4.6, you're using Opus 4.6. It's the same weights, it's the same network. What will change or may change is the harness around it. So the prompts that they're passing, because for people that don't understand is whatever you ask, if you're using Claude or Cursor or something like that, before your prompt reaches that model, the harness is injecting memory, skills, rules. It's injecting a bunch of other things, especially it's injecting things that you can't even see or control. And that's why it matters what harness you choose, because the quality of the prompt comes from the quality of the harness. But in our case, we're going straight to a model, right? There's no prompt injection in our pipeline, right? It's just the model.
That's correct, yes.
So we shouldn't expect to see degradation of quality from the models themselves.
No, if everything remains consistent and nothing gets changed behind the scenes, then yes, one would experience a consistent.
But is the IPS still responsible for like injecting more context about like the data that you were mentioning earlier about maybe jobs? For example?
we wouldn't be able to do that from a platform perspective because the context is very use case specific. What would happen is if you were to build these agents, then you would have your own form of retrieving the relevant context. It could be a job description and formatting that in your prompt so that you get that idealistic outcome. And again, this is back to the evaluation, going how much information versus little information, how much tokens versus how little tokens can I still get the desired output or outcome that I want.
So it's up to teams to build their own injection, their own RAG?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool. Interesting. Has platform team, or is there a team in AIPS, or would the platform team think about providing RAG as a service, like job injection, candidate injection, hire injection, like take our biggest, most common entities, location data or whatever, and then provide that as an out-of-the-box solution that we can tap into without having to build our own RAG? Let's say, for example, there's 5 teams that all would benefit from having some job RAG, some job data retrieval, augmented generation. That's the word, right? Retrieval augmented generation?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If there's like 5 teams that would benefit from having job data injected into their prompts, I would imagine it makes sense for a platform or something like that to exist to make that easier, but maybe that's my naive understanding of how important it is to structure the data as it goes in.
Perhaps from the platform perspective, they could provide the underlying infra for it. So for example, let's say, again, back to the data platform scenario, we have data platform that have many versions of these jobs. Would you see a scenario where there's a single version of the job that everybody injects, or would there be multiple versions?
Yeah, good point. So it's sort of like what we consider valuable in talent search in the team that Arnav and I are in would be not just a job, it would be specific attributes of the job, which you'll only find in our tables, for example. For example, we care about ATS hires, indirect hires, so hires that don't post directly on the SEEK platform. Those jobs might not be in the job data tables from other teams, job data tables. Yeah.
But do you eventually see a scenario where we might end up in a world where like you have all of these different tables and then like an MCP server just sitting in front, which controls and like orchestrates where it gets the data from based on your queries and then like supplies that into the actual prompt?
Traditional RAG where it goes to a vector database and does a vector lookup and then finds the right context. There's a point for that. I think in memory that's probably more common. There are scenarios with MCP where you get MCP resources and tools where you can then also extract additional context. But to answer your question, is there a scenario where there's one MCP server that will understand each of the different use case and agent requirements? I think that's fairly difficult to imagine right now.
But is there like any appetite in the business for something like that
There's
eventually?
always appetite for consistency.
Yep.
Right. In what form or respect or how that eventuates, I think that's always subject to discussion, but there's always appetite for consistency and efficiency.
Sounds like we've talked about a couple of different problems that the AI Gateway solved. I think it's really interesting for the listeners to understand what the problems are that they might face if their business is starting to scale up AI services. Are there any other big wins that we got from the AI Gateway or other big problems that it solves before we talk about the actual architecture for it?
Yeah, I think it's the value adds. So when I say value adds, is a big part of just using LLMs is not necessarily just getting inferences. It's also understanding, hey, how much did it cost me? How long did this take? Can I go see these request responses? Can I actually see what's actually happening under the scenes? So those are the complementary stuff. So every team will get their own Datadog dashboard with a lot of those metrics, see how many requests, how long these requests are taking. So those are the components that can be scaled without much effort, right? And none of the teams have to re-engineer a lot of those aspects as well. So we're quite happy with how that has progressed as well.
Yeah, I guess that's like the hidden benefit of doing something like this is now you have a single source of truth that can sort of correlate the quality from different models. It can correlate the costs from different models. You're not relying on someone to go and source that information from every team that's using this stuff because you have a single source of truth for all that.
Exactly right. And a single deployment, a single everything, right? So a single IAC.
Single fallback solution.
100%.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, okay, cool.
You mentioned like the quality earlier, like the quality depends on the harness and that we don't have a harness that just goes straight to the model. I was wondering why is that? And maybe just my lack of AI knowledge of understanding why there's no harness in this case. But
I think I'm curious to see what you think, but I'll say what I think first, and then maybe you can correct me. My understanding is that the use cases for like SEEK's website aren't usually agentic, which is when you would need a harness, because the harness is essentially forcing the loop for it to like think, iterate until it reaches a stop condition, and then it'll let the response back out. But AI Gateway is just, I gave it a prompt, it thinks, it returns my response.
Mm-hmm.
Correct, yeah. So it is more of a lower level capability for agents or other applications to utilize. In the case of harness, would I be correct in saying that those are the additional context? Is that?
Yeah, it's like context injection as well as this forced loop where it's basically like, depending on what the harness is trying to solve, whether it's Cursor or Claude or whatever, it's essentially not letting it just reply and the reply come back out. It's forcing the reply to be structured JSON so that it can do tooling calls, so that it can call other things. The harness is like, and there's also multiple different kinds of harnesses as well, but the ones that I've used, the ones that I have a high level understanding of, it's basically some level of context injection, like your memory, skills, and rules, and then it's a forced loop that makes the model iterate until it responds with the correct JSON structure, and then it'll call any tools, and then it'll respond back to you. And again, like the harness can be completely different. In fact, it's a good time to mention the leaked Claude Code harness. If you want to have a look at how a harness works, the whole Claude Code harness got leaked, so you can go and check that out.
Yeah. So I think what Shemis have expressed and you did it really well. That's basically what an agent is, right? It's doing that loop. It's finding the next best action. So given this response from the LLM, what do I do next? What has always been interesting, and this is to your question, William, is how does that help the output? I was watching this video, I can't remember from where, but they were talking about effective agents. And one of the mistakes that a lot of people do was not put themselves in the position of an agent. So how I would explain that is we come into a lot of these solutions with so much knowledge in our heads that we expect this magic to happen. If you put yourself into this agent's position and you just read this input that tells you everything you know about the world, do you have sufficient knowledge to make the right judgment call? And that's a question to ask. So if you don't, then you probably haven't provided enough context.
That's a really good pro tip. I never thought about I think that's what I do subconsciously when I'm prompting. Like the first time and I think most people will probably do this too. The first time you prompt it, you give it the most simple prompt and you just expect magic. You just expect it to like infer everything. The way I think about it now is if I was asking a junior engineer to do a task, how much context would I give them? How much hand-holding would I do? How much guidance would I give them? How many documents would I point them to? And then now when I prompt, that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm not just relying on it to infer what good looks like, because obviously, depending on the quality of the model using Opus 4.7 or something like that, it will have a lot of smarts inside of it, the same way that a senior engineer or a staff engineer or a senior staff engineer has a lot of context in their head. It's the same with your models. You choose, Codex, Composer, you choose Opus or whatever. That's kind of like choosing the experience that your engineer has in its brain already. But even with a senior staff engineer, if you just give them a very silly prompt, a very simple prompt, like they're going to have to make some decisions on their own. They're going to have to make some inferences on their own. If you have context in your head about what it is that you want, you should provide it as much as possible. And this is where skills and rules and all that sort of stuff come in. But at the end of the day, whatever your initial prompt is, including, is really what's going to drive the outcome that you get.
Yeah, instantly took me back to the fix this error for a lint issue thingy, and then it just casted it in as unknown as any.
Yeah.
And it was like, yep, I did my thing.
That's the bane of my existence. Every model just loves to cast things to get around linting problems. And like, so we've had to make so many rules and it ignores the rules. And I can talk for days about that. Like never cast, and then it just casts. I saw a rule, but I need to fix the problem. So it prioritizes fixing the problem over obeying the rules. Yeah, it's hilarious when that happens. Maybe while we have some time, we can talk a little bit about the actual architecture. So we talked about the problems that it solves, the extra value adds that you get out of it. But if someone wanted to build an AI gateway for their business, what technologies should they be looking at? What's the pipeline look like for an AI gateway?
Yeah, it's probably one of the most simpler architectures. And I say that is because most of it is all stateless, really. So we use Light LLM internally, and one of the primary drivers is there weren't many good options available about a year ago when we were looking. It was all been fairly new. And that was a good option with a lot of community support to be able to deliver this capability really quickly. And the architecture is very simple. The gateway itself, the proxy layer, is stateless. So we just run it in ECS using Gantry. The stateful parts is the Postgres database, and that just holds the keys. So there's not much data in there. It's just really who has access to this gateway, what's their RPM, TPM, what's their budget, what's their limits. And then we have readers for all the logging for how many requests a particular key has made, which models are doing well. So readers, again, is the mechanism for the fallback. So it cools down a model. Requests are being made to one of the regions Bedrock. It's failing. Readers will hold that source of truth, and then all the subsequent will then be rerouted to a new one.
Yeah, you don't want 100 instances all hitting the same model and realizing there's something not working.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
I guess also cost management as well, right? Like if Well, maybe not, because you mentioned that like we're not distributing the cost out to the teams just yet. But I imagined if we hit a token limit or something, or a specific team had a token limit assigned to them, then you could use the Redis to control that kind of thing as well, right?
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
And part of that also is just us then taking that solution and integrating it within the SEEK ecosystem. So it's integrating it with Datadog, integrating with Databricks, so that we can bring a lot of the visibility and the logging and the metrics to the users that actually use it.
Yeah, cool. So did I get that right? It's just ECS Fargate with some Redis caching, more or less. And then the rest of it is just infrastructure stuff.
Yeah.
Like whether you do single zone deployment or multi-AZ, multi-region, how you handle that kind of infrastructure.
Yeah, so from platform side, it's very minimal coding. It's really a lot of IAC is where all the work happens.
And then obviously Light LLM is really what unlocked a lot of this capability, like the fallback behavior and stuff like that.
Correct, yeah. So we we want to get the value. We do not want to re-engineer a lot of the capabilities that are already available right now.
Yeah. Is there a proprietary thing coming out, or are you aware of any proprietary solutions like Light LLM? Because Light LLM is open source, isn't it?
It is open source, but they do have an enterprise solution as well. So that is something that we can look into the future. But again, we also need to keep our options open and see, are there any better vendors?
What exactly is Light LLM?
Yeah, so it's a open source software or package. I think it originally started off just from a client-side perspective where it goes, hey, we've got so many different LLM vendors. We have AWS, we have GCP, we have all these other different ones. How can we provide a consistent client-side approach to communicating or interacting with all of these different providers? And then, again, I'm probably making this up, but then I presume that then advanced to a proxy layer, which is then how can we create this proxy so that all the different people can just use an open AI SDK, right? They just want to simplify it. So all the different providers, LLM providers, you don't have to create different integration patterns.
Yeah. So it's just like a TypeScript package or a JavaScript package, right? And you make calls to it and you say, I want to talk to an LLM, and that has a configuration sitting on the side that's like, this is the model you should call first. If it's failing, call this model, da-da-da-da-da.
And the mapping as well.
Yeah.
So you'll call the consistent API and then it'll map to whatever the provider needs as well.
Does it standardize the response and everything as well?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So
Light LLM does response standardization and things like that as well.
So if you're trying to invoke a LLM call in Bedrock, you've got two options. You've got the Bodo 3, I'm talking in Python terms, but it'll be similar for JavaScript as well. There's the model invoke and there's the converse. And none of those are the same as the OpenAI SDK, right? So Light LLM will have to do a conversion between the OpenAI SDK to Bedrock and back.
Interesting. You mentioned Python. I know that for a lot of SEEK, it's a JavaScript, TypeScript shop, but I know in AIPS, it's much more heavily on the Python side of things. Is there a technological reason for choosing that language, or is it just capability? Like the engineers in that space, it's what they're comfortable with. So you just keep, which is the same reason why we choose TypeScript a lot of the time in the hire side or the candidate side of SEEK. It's like, it's what we all know. You can move between teams easily. What's the driving force for choosing Python?
Yeah, I think there's two sets of cohorts in the AIPS side. There's the engineers and then there's the data scientists. So data science, not just SEEK, but across the world, when you look at the libraries that are utilized to train ML models, even before the generative models. So we're talking about XGBoost or any of the classification type models, they're all Python based. So as a data scientist, if all your libraries are Python and really your environment is that, and that's kind of what you start to utilize. As engineers, we have a broad range, right, in AIPS. Some are Java engineers, and I think we do have a lot of Java applications. But what you'll find predominantly is most of them are always have been around the back-end type languages as opposed to the front-end type languages.
Yeah, cool. Nice. Yeah, no, it was really awesome having you on. Hopefully people learned a lot from this. I know I definitely did. Definitely filled in some gaps that I had.
I'm glad, and thank you for obviously inviting me along.
Oh, awesome. Thanks very much.